Good morning and welcome to the second part of this two-part series, How to Talk About Race with Students, hosted by the Dakota County Safe and Drug-Free Schools, which is made up of secondary student support personnel from across Dakota County's 10 school districts. We want to thank the Minnesota Department of Health and the SHIP partnership for its generous funding of this training series. My name is Shannon Bailey, and I coordinate mental health promotion and suicide prevention for the Dakota County Public Health Department, and I will serve as the facilitator today. Everyone is muted throughout the presentation. However, you are welcome to submit questions in the Q&A box as well as comments in the chat box. Derek will be addressing your questions at 9:45. My colleague Jenny will be monitoring the chat box and the Q&A box throughout the morning. Immediately following today's session, you will receive a link for the evaluation. Upon completing it, you will then be sent the link for the certificate of attendance. Both sessions, the session last month on February 5th and today's, will be emailed to everyone who registered for either session. The recordings will be sent to all people in mid-March. To begin, I want to say that we respectfully acknowledge that Dakota County is located on traditional and ancestral lands of Indigenous people from time immemorial. By offering this acknowledgement, we work towards our value of acting inclusively and our mission of learning and recognize our collective responsibility to engage our community in the history of the land of Indigenous people. I'm grateful to introduce Mr. Derek Francis, who is a passionate school counselor with years of experience focusing on proactive, equity-based approaches. He currently serves as the manager of counseling services for the Minneapolis Public Schools. Today, Derek will share his wisdom on when race incidents occur, what can we do in advance, as well as what we can do in the moment. Thank you, Derek. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be back to connect and present. Thank you for time here, waking up nice and early to spend the next couple hours together. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen. I'm really excited to have us dive into some awesome dialogue, and the timeliness of it is also key. I want to make sure that you all are getting content that's so timely for today. And so I want to introduce myself again. My name is Derek Francis, and I'm a school counselor. I currently serve as the manager of counseling services in Minneapolis Public Schools, and it's been 9 years I've been a school counselor. And I love it. It's just being in education has been awesome. And one of the things that I've enjoyed is being a role model for students, especially students who haven't really seen a person of color, a man of color in education. I enjoy times where students come up to me and say, Mr. Francis, like, can we have this kind of conversation? And I relish the fact that a lot of students, white and Black, are able to find space with me to have conversations around race and their identity. And so I'm really passionate about it. My daughter is in the picture there, and she's someone who helps me just be excited for this work because she's biracial. She's going to be starting school in about 2 years. She'll be in preschool somewhere, and a lot of the conversations we have in our home and with friends and families has really encouraged me to do this work. And so I'm really excited to connect with you all today and provide strategies. So feel free. The other thing is I want to make sure to connect with you all. We're all here in Minnesota, and that's the awesome part. But I know we have guests joining from outside the country too. I think I saw someone's here joining us from India, and I'm so glad that we have people joining from around the country, and I'm thankful that you're here. And so go ahead and share, if you'd like, where you're from, what organization you're with. I know there's school counselors in the space, but there's also teachers and admin and people in the health field, or county employees, mental health employees. So share where you're from, and the kind of work you do. And I want to make sure that today is a chance for us to connect and get to know each other a little bit more too, because relationships are really huge. And so I like to start off with like an icebreaker. But before we get to that, I want to make sure that we know that we're centering ourselves for this space, that it's an environment where you're at home on your screen. It's me and you. And so I'm glad that you're welcoming me into your space. And if you're new to a presentation like this, thank you for the boldness to say, I am going to come to a session to learn strategies to talk about race and to address racism. So we're going to learn some skills today. I'm so excited for us to learn some skills and practice. And that means it's going to come with some vulnerability. And in that, it means times where you might realize, oh man, goodness, I have to be vulnerable and be honest about the times I might have said this, or the things that we're talking about. I may have done that same microaggression, or in that situation, I might have been quiet when I could have spoke up. So I encourage you, this isn't a space where we're shaming anyone or making anyone feel embarrassed or calling anyone Karen. This is a space where we're going to grow and learn together, because our shared value is to support students. And that's the passion for this work, is support students across different backgrounds. And then my ask for you today, because I'm so excited to give you some strategies that you can use starting today, is that you be proactive, that you take the stuff that we're learning from understanding and knowledge in your head, and things that you write down, into actual things you do. So things you actually say. And that's the beauty of today, is giving you resources, tools. And so get comfortable, relax, get your mug of hot chocolate or coffee or bagel or whatever you need for this morning. I want you to be comfortable. My goal is to make this engaging. We're going to have some videos we watch to give us context. So I am excited to connect with you all. Before I move forward, I'm going to check out the chat, because I see we have friends here from all over the country. And it's super awesome to see we have friends from Charles. Oh my goodness, I love Charleston. Actually, we have friends from Charleston. We have friends from Apple Valley. We have ISD 196 staff members. People down in Northfield are here. I've been down to Northfield, actually. I've been down for the defeat of Jesse James days. So good to see folks here from Northfield. There's a school counselor from Minnetonka. Hey, I'm so glad to see that there's a variety of friends here from across the state. I am really, really excited, actually, because our icebreaker is Minnesota focused, and so I'm really excited that we're gonna be able to connect. So we're gonna do activity called This or That, and it's around Minnesota. And so you hear the little Minnesota accent in my voice, Minnesota. And so our friends that are here from outside the state, or even from outside the country, you're going to learn a little bit about Minnesota today. I know a lot of you probably know about Prince. I love Prince and the lakes that we have here. But we're gonna get into some real Minnesota this or that for these questions. So you choose one of the two, which you prefer. As a Minnesotan, what would you prefer? And so the first one is, if you got a chance to go to the State Fair for a day or Mall of America, which would you prefer? For me, I think it would be State Fair. Give me some cheese curds, give me a turkey leg. I will be at the State Fair all day long, rain or shine. But I know there's some friends out there that would do Mall of America. When I was growing up, it was called Camp Snoopy. It was a Nickelodeon universe now. I love the State Fair, though. Awesome. I'm excited for it to come back this year. I did the drive-through one last year. If you got a weekend getaway to go anywhere in, and not anywhere, out of these two, Duluth or Rochester, where would you do a weekend getaway? And I see a lot of Duluth. I like Duluth. Duluth is awesome. Honestly, though, Rochester, I checked there out. The bike trails are amazing. Rochester's a beautiful little gem. I like Duluth. It's just a little chilly and breezy, but I like the area up there. So it's if you haven't checked out Rochester, though, check it out in the summer. It's amazing, beautiful, really nice. So cool. Let's see the next one. So movies, the Mighty Ducks, I put Mighty Ducks. Mighty Ducks or Jingle All the Way. And as you're choosing, these movies have something in common. They're both filmed here in Minnesota. I know, I remember it, I'm 35. And so I remember both movies coming out and I was like, no way, Minnesota's on TV. I saw Mall of America in the movie, and then I remember I think it was in Mighty Ducks. I saw, what's the place called? The restaurant in St. Paul. It'll come to me. But I was like, wow, that's pretty cool that there's, Mickey's Diner. Thank you. I saw that on there. I was like, this is awesome seeing Minnesota on TV. And so the fun fact, both of those movies are shot here in Minnesota. I think this next one's for my foodies. I'm a foodie all day. Juicy Lucy or Walleye. I'm a huge Juicy Lucy fan. I love Juicy Lucy's. I know a lot of folks like the 5.8 for a Juicy Lucy. To my friends here who don't eat meat or are vegan, I'm sorry, I just threw out those Minnesota staples. But I know Matt's Bar I've been to, the Nook I've been to as well. But yeah, I like a good Juicy Lucy. I'm glad to see folks giving suggestions. I hope so bad we can save the chat too, because I'm like, I'm going to try some of these places. Matt's Bar, the Nook, yep. But I do like some good fresh walleye too. I like, and I'm one of those people, I like dipping I like my walleye fried. And then I like dipping it in tartar sauce and hot sauce. I'm a multiple dipper kind of person. I think we have one more. You know, this is coming up. This is Minnesota classic season. Bonfire or sitting by the lake. And I know some of you are like, I do both. Yeah, I knew it. Someone said both. I knew that was coming. That's classic Minnesota for you. We do both. And so, I love that. Bonfires and sitting by the lake. I like sitting by the lake during the day, especially I like going up north to those smaller, more relaxed lakes. I enjoy that so much. And then bonfires, I think, are fun in the fall too. So I am glad that we got to connect a little bit. I've never been to the Boundary Waters, and so I need to put that on my bucket list. And I live here, and I've never been to the Boundary Waters. And so I hope to learn more about heading up there too. I've heard stories of folks going to the Boundary Waters and not having cell phone service. And so the other part about this activity that brings me so much joy is all these things that we're talking about that we enjoy together. Those build relationships, those build affinity. And the beauty of it is when I connect with students and we're talking about the different kinds of food we like or events we go to or movies we like to see, those are the ways to build that natural connection with students. And so I really encourage you, especially students cross-culturally, to find those things you have in common. Now, even talking with some of you, I'm like, you know what? If it was summertime, I'd sit by a bonfire with you. I'd eat some walleye or a Juicy Lucy. and I think that's the kind of stuff that brings us together and shows us some humanity, because in those moments we're enjoying life together, we're enjoying being human together. And I really hope some of the strategies today can help us center on that. And so I have to be aware. Let me make sure. Here's what we're going to cover today. And again, utilize the chat. We're going to have some polls coming up. And so I really encourage you to utilize the chat, use the polls. We have time together. We're going to get deep into some solid conversation. But the goal is to help you gain a better understanding of how racism shows up in schools. We're going to just talk about how it appears. Where do you see it? Where does it show up? And then we're going to learn some strategies to respond when we see racism happening in school, and at a small level or at a large level. And then we're going to also wrap up with strategies to lead proactive lessons. So just giving you basic strategies for lessons, how to lead it, to discuss race and racism and identity. And we're also going to practice some strategies to combating racism in interpersonal connections. So when someone says something and you're like, oh boy, it got really awkward in here, giving you some skills, some strategies to say, all right, I have something I can say, or I know some things I can do to help in this moment. So that's what we're going to do today. I am really excited to connect with you all. And again, this is a space for us to grow and learn together as educators, whether you're a counselor, a psychologist, a doctor, a lawyer, a mental health professional. We're all here in this space. We're all serving students and families in the community here in Minnesota. And I'm from Minnesota too, born and raised. And so this is home for me. And so I really hope that you're able to use some of the stuff we cover today. So right now, where we're at in our country's history, we're in Minneapolis. I'm in Minneapolis proper. And a lot of you may be in the cities surrounding, or maybe even in Minneapolis. And as we're in a moment of history we're in right now, I have to begin by talking about strategies coming up, because the Derek Chauvin trial is starting on Monday. And I know here in Minneapolis Public Schools, we're already preparing conversation starters to have with students, lesson activities, spaces to hear students and make sure that we're affirming them when they have things that they're thinking about. If you look at this picture here, we have students who live in the neighborhood all around where George Floyd was murdered. There's actually students who live upstairs from Cup Foods, from where this played out. And we have many schools that are right in the area. And so for us, having a conversation about the murder of George Floyd is something that we know is crucial. And not only that, I think it's something that we should be thinking about for ourselves as adults who will be working with students here in the coming weeks and maybe months, addressing the murder trial. And so I want to start off by giving us just and I am excited for my colleague who does work in Minneapolis. He also supports WCCO monthly with some resources on how to address race. And so I'm going to share this video with you all so that you can take a listen to some strategies you can work on with the upcoming trial.
With the Derek
So
Chauvin.
take a listen around some strategies for taking care of yourself during the trial coming up.
Trial scheduled to start on Monday. Minneapolis is preparing for the physical safety of city buildings and of people.
But a lot of us may need to prepare ourselves to protect our own mental and emotional well-being during the trial.
So this morning we have Michael Walker, a PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota, on with us this morning to share some insights and perspective really on preparing ourselves for what is to come. Michael, thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Why don't we just get into it? Where do we start?
Yeah, well, first, I think that we have to really be mindful that words matter. And, sometimes we've been hearing lately that some people have been calling this the George Floyd case. And really, we have to be intentional. I like how you guys started the segment saying it's the Derek Chauvin trial, because that's exactly what it is. It reminds me of when we were back in the mid-'90s when we had the O.J. Simpson trial. We didn't call it the Nicole Simpson or Ron Goldman trial, right? We called it O.J. Simpson because he was the one that was on trial. So we got to be mindful of the language that we use. And so as we're thinking about this really important time that we're coming into, because the world will be watching us here in Minneapolis, and the city is preparing itself, right? And one thing that we know that the city is doing is they're preparing different physical aspects of our community so that it can be safe. And so we're saying, how can we use those same tactics that the city is doing for physical safety for our mental and emotional safety? And so one thing that they're doing is using barricades, right? So barricades is really to limit access to certain areas and creating these safe zones. And one way that we can barricade our mental state and our emotional state is to not be so glued to the TVs and the media outlets to have to watch this trial go on 24/7. so we can make sure that we're taking time out for ourselves, that we're not just inundated with all this information and all these things that can trigger some traumatic experiences for some people.
There are detoured routes that the city is kind of set up, to make sure people are able to move around safely and protest safely. And you think maybe we all need to think about what our detours will be too, right?
For sure, for sure. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we'll come in contact with so many different people, whether it be at work, whether it be in the community. And sometimes we know where some people stand on certain topics and certain aspects. And so how do we make sure that we're not engaging in all those conversations? So how can we find routes where we can avoid some of those conversations and some of those spaces that we may not want to be in at certain times because our mental state isn't there already? And so it's really intentional that we find these detoured routes and avoiding certain spaces and certain people.
And yeah, we've seen office buildings here downtown boarding up things, even down at the government center. And I think you're also telling us, like, we need to put up some of our own protective walls emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. Because again, this will elicit a lot of different emotions from different people. And so one thing that we can do to kind of find ways to board up is we have to find some affinity spaces. And what I mean by affinity spaces, the spaces that you can speak freely, because there will be a lot of emotion that will come out of this, that people are experiencing, anxiety. And so to have a space that you can kind of list out some of the things and feelings and emotions that you're having without being judged based on those things. And sometimes there are conversations that just need to be had amongst people who have the same skin color as you, who are in the same aspect and thinking like you think, so that you can have that freedom to just release and not be judged, because that's really important during times like this.
The city and the state have called on additional support to make sure they can kind of take care of business during this. We all may need to do that too, right, Michael?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like you said, the city and state are calling on for additional officers, maybe the National Guard and other servicemen to help when things may get out of whack, right? And so as individuals, we will have those moments and chances where we may get out of whack. And so how do we call on people that we can use that can help calm us down? How do we call on people that can help be our quote unquote accountability partners, where they can help us when we are maybe going down the wrong path or maybe have a wrong thought or wrong perspective, and they can guide us in the right space and right way. I think those things are very important for us to seek out and to be open to that information and insight from those people.
And Michael, as you talk to your friends and people who you work with, what are the big things that you're hearing right now about how people are feeling?
Well, obviously what's coming up real quick here is the jury, right? The jury selection piece is what's going to be happening next week. And I think a lot of people are worried about what is that jury going to look like? How is that jury going to show up? Is it going to be really a jury of the peers, and who is going to be represented on that jury? And so I know that is going to be on the minds of people once those members are selected. And I think that's really crucial right there. Yeah. And then really the outcome. I know that there's going to be people that are upset no matter what the outcome is on both sides of this. And so how are we preparing as a city to understand that there will be people that are upset on both sides?
Mm-hmm. Very good. Good advice this morning, Michael Walker. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, definitely good advice. And I hope that just for our time and purpose for today, that you're being mindful of yourself. Because as we're moving forward with addressing the issues from the murder of George Floyd over the next couple of weeks, we have to be aware of ourselves, that these bring up feelings and emotions. Our whole world was impacted by the murder of George Floyd, and we're about to bring up a wound. And this might look different for some students that we're working with, that emotional trauma. Because even for myself as an African-American man, it is bringing up and I'm bracing myself even for the conversations that are going to be had again. And not only that, the stress that comes along with it, it can be exhausting having conversations at times. And so I think it's so important that we're able to be aware of what we're watching on TV. I think of social media and the news in terms of diet. What are you feeding yourself? What are you feeding your mind? And because those things impact your belief and how you feel. And so being aware of how much news and TV you're watching, because we have to be emotionally stable and ready to support students. And these are strategies we need to make sure we're sharing with students as well, is that they're making sure that they're taking time to find spaces to have these conversations with us as staff. And I hope that I can give you some strategies today that'll help you with having conversations, whether it's about George Floyd or other major events in your school. And so I wanted to start us there because we're here in the Twin Cities. It's so important that we are preparing ourselves, whether it's in our own family for having conversations or with your colleagues at work, whether you're in person or virtually. And so that's our starting point for today. I hope some of those strategies that were shared can be something that you can think about and get ready to use. And so we're going to dive into just going further into talking and addressing race and racism in our schools and with youth, because it's so important for us to understand and have context of the why. And so some of the things that are important for talking about race with students is that it validates their identity. Seeing students who feel comfortable around their race and ethnic development and ethnic identity is so huge. It makes a difference for students. And we as educators play a huge role in helping students feel like they belong. Impacts how they do in school, their assignments, the classes they're going to want to take risks to take. Also college and career readiness. Students, especially students from underrepresented populations that are marginalized, don't always get an opportunity to see people who look like them or affirmed of people who look like them in career fields. And so it's so important that we're able to help talk about race so that students are able to see themselves not only represented in their high school, but also saying, hey, I can go to college or a post-sec or a future career and be able to show up how I am and know that I am a great employee, the way I am, how I look. And that feels confident, like I can go to a job and be me. And people are going to see me and pronounce my name right and say that I can come in and have my hair the style that it is. That is all a huge part of feeling comfortable in your career. And then also dovetail into, when I say comfort, just that social emotional piece. So those are some reasons, and we'll talk a little bit about the trauma of how it feels to experience racism and microaggressions. And so that's why we need to have this conversation. Educators report seeing racism and bias in schools, but then also will share, well, goodness, I haven't really addressed it or tackled it myself. And so that's why it's important for us to do a session like this so we can start unpacking it. And so before we can go forward, it's so important that we understand historically how our country has introduced students from different backgrounds into space. So our country, how I think it's so important for us to have some knowledge around just the formation of schools, and not only that, how recent our schools have seen a huge social change. And so before I get to the video that we're going to see around understanding how integration went on in our country, I think it's important to understand the larger social context that we had in our schools. I know last time we gave a little bit of history is understanding the divide. So segregation. Our schools were founded in racism of segregation, where we had schools where white students went to and schools where Black and brown students went to. And so whether it was officially legal or it was done like even states here in Minnesota where students of color would be turned away from white schools, this is how schools began, the origins in our country, and along with the other areas of our country that were segregated. So I think it's important before we dive into a forward conversation around race and racism in schools that we are aware of how we even got to a point of needing to address race in schools and how racism has shown up historically in our schools from day one. So let's take a quick watch.
As our image reveals itself, the 1957 school year is about to begin, and an angry mob is trying to stop 9 Black students from entering Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, there we go.
The question I usually get asked is, were we scared? I think initially we didn't anticipate clearly all of the violence and turmoil that occurred. The first day that we attempted to go to school, 8 of us were at one part of the school, and Elizabeth Eckford was at another part. And it was the mob that followed Elizabeth. Then you begin to feel that this was a very hostile, violent group of people. Even at that point, I told myself if we didn't go through with it, didn't attend Central and backed out, it would just reinforce the view that the African American community in Little Rock wasn't interested in making a change in things.
During the 1950s, African Americans throughout the country were trying to make their voices heard.
We, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
The driver demanded that I give this seat up to a white man. I didn't feel that I was being treated as a human being. I refused to give up this seat. I said no.
Little Rock was a year after the Montgomery bus boycott. So we had seen the impact of Rosa Parks and the beginning of Dr. King's career, and knew that things could change.
All in favor, let it be known by standing on your
feet. The first step for the Little Rock Nine came in May 1954, when the U.S. Supreme Court issued its opinion in the landmark case, Brown versus the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education. Separate but equal was inherently unequal, and integration was now the law of the land. In 1957, this decision and the power of the federal government were tested in Little Rock, Arkansas.
We didn't, at the moment we were selected, have any idea it was going to be as difficult as it turned out to be.
In the face of protests at Central High School, the governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus, calls out the National Guard. His official reasoning is to preserve the peace and prevent violence.
It clearly wasn't to protect us. It was to make a symbolic stand. It was to protect the way of life in the South, because they barred our entrance.
Hoping to throw open these school doors, President Dwight Eisenhower does the unprecedented. He calls in the 101st Airborne Division of the U.S. Army.
I think President Eisenhower wanted to show that the federal government was supreme in this. And they could have done what they needed to do with 100 troops. But 1,000 paratroopers was really meant to send a message.
Under the guard of the U.S. Army, the students are finally able to do something seemingly very simple: go to school. But it would not be easy for Ernest Green or his 8 fellow black students.
School was like going to war every day. The walks from class to class were where, you had a lot of harassment, a lot of physical violence.
But Ernest Green persevered, becoming the first black graduate of Central High School with the class of 1958. Green would eventually go on to a successful banking career and government service in the Carter administration. But in 1958, integration was not complete in Little Rock. The following year, Governor Faubus closed all public schools in Arkansas instead of complying with desegregation. Schools in Arkansas would not be fully integrated until 1972. Yet,
And so I hope you had a moment to just pause and reflect. And I want to make sure that because context is so huge, I think. And part of the reason I think it's important to share this is this context is information I heard growing up firsthand. And so I had family members who, because we're talking in the 1950s. And so there's people alive today who went to segregated schools. And so in our country, there's people alive who were around when this was going on. they were attending schools that were all Black or all white. And so I would hear these stories from older relatives when they would talk about their early school experiences. If you know anyone who is 65 and up, especially if they live in areas of our country that were really like Kansas and Arkansas and more some of the other southern states, I asked about what their school experience was like. My own dad shared about his upbringing going to a segregated school. He went to an all-Black elementary school, even after segregation had been lifted. And so it's so important that we're aware that these early instances are how students came to school to integrate, how they got to know each other in a broad social context. And you saw as the students were being integrated, they shared about being yelled at or having people harassing them walking into the building, and the government having to get involved just for students of different races to go to school together. And so it's important for us to know that is how this really began, where racism in schools really rooted from even prior. But once we got into a space where we're going to be in school together, there was a lot of pushback. And so that's why, again, it's important for us to address this, because we know it impacts students in the school climate. It's hard to feel welcome and included in a school if you're experiencing racism, if you're seeing it show up, if you're seeing that people in your school or maybe are saying things towards you or about you or people who are from your community and not really, and it's impacting you. And so I think it's important to know that race and racism happens in our schools, and oftentimes the educators are there in the midst of it. This page here shows a lot of research that was done by the Ed Trust, along with the group used to be called Teaching Tolerance. I forgot their new name, but they talk about how the different reports have came up of racism and hate and biases and bias in schools. And just looking at the percentage of times where nothing was done or reported or even any action taken by the school. And so we're going to do our first poll question around just asking, where is your comfort level around you being in a space of addressing race when you see it, when there's opportunities in school. So we're going to pull up our first poll just to, and again, it's just, it's anonymous. And so it's just getting your feedback right now. If you're in a school building and you're being asked to lead a conversation with students or colleagues or community members around race and racism, how comfortable would you feel be doing that? And so go ahead and we'll take a minute. And as you're filling it out, I'll pause so that you can have a moment to just answer how you with the best response you have. Take another 10 seconds to complete it, whether you're somewhat comfortable, you're not sure, you're not comfortable, but you would with support, very comfortable. So I think we're going to close out the poll soon and see where things stand at. Cool. So we have, and again, this is not a space to make anyone feel guilty or shamed. It's a place to grow. And so it looks like we have about 40% of folks who are in the space of not comfortable or not comfortable, but would with support. Some folks who are not sure how they would, and then we have some friends who are somewhat or very comfortable. So as you can see, folks are a little bit all over. There's people that are coming in from all different levels of understanding how to hold these conversations, how to create space, how to speak up around race and racism. Well, the goal of today that I'm excited about is that we're going to talk about just some different strategies. So I'm going to give you a combination now moving forward of scenarios and strategies. And so the end goal is that you're able to say, all right, where I'm at right now, I'm here because I'm going to grow and learn, and I'm going to leave with some strategies so that I can have some natural endpoints to talk about race and racism. And when it comes up and it gets uncomfortable, I know some strategies I can dive into and use too. So this is our ground setting. We know that this is a part of our country. We know what's been going on historically. Now let's start getting proactive. And remember some of the things we talked about last time about yourself as the educator and how to be mindful of yourself and how you're showing up into these spaces. And so we're going to begin diving in, just looking at the current state of our of Minnesota. Over the past last summer, over the past year, since the events of George Floyd, students. So we're talking high school, elementary, middle school students, and even college students throughout Minnesota have been sharing about the instances where they've experienced racism. Stories by the thousands have been coming up where students are saying, I experienced racism in school. This is what happened in this classroom growing up, or even at Benilde. Here's what happened at Benilde when I had conversations with students, or here's what I heard in the hallway or saw in my locker. And so it's important that we know these things are happening in our schools daily, even during distance learning, seeing things happen on social media. You might be thinking even about your own school, about times where you've seen racism in the hallway or maybe on social media or maybe within staff-to-staff connections. So being mindful that these events are happening and students are feeling it. There's an emotional hurt. There's a feeling of being other, of feeling like, am I not welcomed here? Same feelings that probably the students felt back when schools were being integrated. And so you got to imagine if the students are feeling that now, if their family members felt that growing up, if they're a second or two generation removed from that first class that was integrated, those stories though are still rich. And if you're re-experiencing some of the same stuff family members experienced when they were integrated in school, that can be heavy. And we're talking about now the mental health side of things, the stress, the mental jungle gym of, do I belong in this class? Do people here really care about me? If you've never had that experience where you know something doesn't feel right or something hurts or someone's treating you poorly and no one's listening, that can be devastating. And so it's important for us to be aware of how racism shows up in schools, what it looks like. And so we talked about how it looks like historically, but now let's take a deeper look. And we showed just in that last slide there, just some different ways it's shown up and people are speaking out here in Minnesota. 59% of times where schools had to take action when discrimination and bias occurred was around race. And so just being mindful that there's a lot of times where there's racial incidents. That's the leading cause of hate and discrimination in schools. Also know that the different places you'll see this in your school, and I'll share a specific story coming up, but in my years as a school counselor, I've seen racism as well. I've seen it whether it's in hallways or seen it in the classroom, and it'll be stuff that students will say or they'll say under their breath. Students are savvy. They know how to say things when staff are not around or who to say it to or the right thing to say. And so those are the things we have to be aware of, knowing that can happen in the school community, whether that's at sporting events or it's happening at different activities that students are involved in together. And it can look sometimes like this, where it's on your bathroom stalls. Or it's written in, I remember growing up, we had textbooks that we had to share with other people, and you see racist things in the textbooks. So being aware of what it looks like and how it shows up in schools. I'm going to share this video because I think it's important for us to actually hear from youth about what they are hearing in schools. And so this video is called The Lie. And I share this video because it's actual words from fourth graders around things that they've heard in school. And I know, let's take a listen and see if there's any of the things you hear in here where you're like, goodness, I've heard that from students in my school.
The lie. Muslims are terrorists.
Black boys are bad.
Girls are not athletic.
Latinos can't speak English well.
Chechens are a bad influence on others. Africans aren't smart.
Asians can't play sports.
All black people are thieves.
People from Mexico bring nothing good. I'm too pretty to be Togolese.
The lie. All white people are racist. The truth. I'm white and I'm not racist. I care for people who are of another race. I may have brown skin, but I'm the same as you. If you test me, I will succeed. And you underestimate me for the color of my skin, I'm tired of the hurtful words.
Latinos like me can speak English well. They are learning, doing their best. Have you learned a second language? It's hard, and yet people yell at Latinos because they don't understand what they're saying.
Why? Why do they say that? Why do they? What did I ever do to you to make you judge me and say that? You should know, not all Muslims are terrorists.
But you push me down just to pull yourself up. You use lies to make me feel like that's what I really am. Like I really am a thief. But I know I'm not a thief because I still am just like you. So you shouldn't judge me or people like me. So why are you judging them? You don't know them. So stop the lies. Don't let the others brainwash you. Those negative words are a noisy room full of rumors. I just want to cover my ears and just forget.
What is the truth? I know the truth. The truth that lies in my heart. The truth about black boys. I am black. This is me. The lie about black boys that I don't believe in. And I know it's not the truth. Because the truth that is real is my truth.
Girls can definitely be athletic.
I am Asian. I play soccer. I can be pretty and be Togolese. Beautiful people come from all over the world.
I am Latino, and I can speak English.
I'm not a thief. I've never stolen anything.
I'm not a terrorist, so think again.
I am black. I am not aggressive. I would not harm anyone.
Everybody deserves equal rights. Everybody deserves respect for who they are. Racist people don't believe these things. I'm not one. I am me.
So take a minute, pause, and soak that in a little bit, because I know those are some things that our students are sharing that they heard, that they hear in the hallways, that they hear at school. And now these are fourth graders who are sharing that they had been hearing that. And so I think it's so important that we don't discount our students when they share, this is what I've been hearing. A fourth grader is saying, I'm not a terrorist because I'm Muslim. I'm black doesn't mean I'm a bad person or I'm gonna steal anything. These are fourth graders that already are aware of the microaggressions and the racism that's coming at them. And even the white students saying, you know, just because I'm white doesn't mean I don't care about people of a different race. So I think it's important. This is our state here in Minnesota of things that kids are hearing in schools, in the hallways, in the bathrooms, from peers, from staff. And this is the work that really pulls my heart. And again, as a school counselor, that's my wheelhouse, where seeing these things happen in schools, I've been in buildings where I've seen it happen, where I've watched students say things and post things that are really hurtful. And I've watched students talk about how it's really impacting them. And so that's why it's so important that we address racism in schools. And so I want to go ahead and just share a little bit about myself. And this is actually the reason I really got into this work of talking about race and racism in schools. And it's changed my life. And so I started my career at North High in Minneapolis, and I loved it. It changed my career. I knew I wanted to be a school counselor. After 4 years at North High, I went to Champlin Park High School, and that's the school that I went to as a student as well. And so I was so excited to go there and work, and I was like, wow, the same school that I played basketball at and I graduated from, I get to be a school counselor here. And I was kind of a class goofy guy. I'm 6'4", so just dangly, and I love just connecting with the peers that I had there. Unfortunately, I knew there was racism at Champlin Park before I went there to be a staff. I experienced it as a student, and it was just in the air. there'd be incidents that would come out. And so when I took the position, I knew that was something that that'd be walking into. And I relished it. I said, of all places, why not the school I went to? And so my second year at Champlain Park, during the state tournament for volleyball, there was some student athletes making their way to the game. And on their ride to the game, there's a recording of some of the girls, the white students that are on the team, singing a song using the N-word. And as they're singing the song and using the racial slurs, they're recorded. And that recording makes social media. And I know some of you listening in might have had something like this happen in your school before, and you're like, oh man, I remember what that's like. Or, oh man, the conversations at school, or what are we gonna do now? How do we handle this? What do we do? What do I say? It gets tense. Do we even address it in our classroom? And so when I was at Champlain Park, a lot of students felt the stress from having to navigate racism. They wanted to see something done. Champlain Park has 3,000 students. At the time I was there, about 60% students that were white, 40% students of color. And so the students there really were impacted by the racial incident that occurred. So what I'm going to do is show you a short snippet of the students sharing how they felt, because I know some of you, this may be how students in your own school feel when racism occurs. And these are some of the students that I remember connecting with, working with, and I'll share with you some strategies that you can use when you have a major racial incident occur in your building. So take a listen to how the students felt and what their needs were and desires after this racial incident.
Last Friday, we were shown that racism still exists within Champlain Park.
Snap, don't clap.
Racism is ignorance. Racism is not only about consequences, but about education and justice. Today we are here to present how many people were impacted by this issue. Don't leave only for the consequence of what might come out of it. That is not the only intention behind this. But use this opportunity to educate the ignorant. The people that don't know.
Yes.
The people that don't understand. This is our platform. Look how big of a platform we have. Look how much support we got within CP. Because we stand together. This is the rebel family right here.
So I share that video because students in the aftermath of that racial incident at Champlain Park demanded heavily, saying, please, we really want something to be done. We want education. We want conversations. We want there to be spaces where we can have these kind of talks about what's going on. And so what I'm going to do before we go into some strategies, we'll do another poll. And so we'll do our second poll. If you can go ahead and get ready to answer the question from that, is asking yourself, and you can answer this more than once, because students now are sharing, they've seen racism in schools. We've shown you different examples. You heard from students what they're experiencing. I shared a few. I've experienced racism in schools from students and staff as well. Whether it's sad to even admit it, but staff or students and their families saying, well, we don't know if we want you as our kids counselor. Could we get someone else? Or, just knowing that my presence sometimes has discomfort. I think that's, I've seen that on social media, the things that students may say to each other. My own students posting things on social media, seeing things in the bathroom, on the stalls. So take a moment and just fill out how you've seen it show up in schools, and then we're going to spend time now diving deep into strategies. How do we navigate situations? And we'll start by, how do you navigate racial incidents in your school? So take another minute or so to fill out the multiple choice. And for those of you who need a break to stretch, refill your coffee mug, adjust your blanket, get a little cozy, turn your volume up. I bet you sounds like turn it down, Derek. You're so loud already. Do the adjustment you need. It's Friday. I see it's about to be nice here next weekend or next week. If we want to go ahead and close the poll and then see where we're at. All right, and so there's a lot of data here. And so folks are sharing where they've seen racism in schools. And so, and this is telling, I think, take a moment to look, that student to student interaction. That's where we're seeing a lot of racism. 88% of, I know that 100 out of the 147 responses, 129 said they responded to this one. That they see it in student-student interaction, see it at sporting events. I know I've seen it with staff to student interaction as well, where I've watched racism and even staff to staff. So I think it's important, we're all on the same page. We know it happens in schools. We've seen it. Some people out there have experienced it, and I don't want to take it lightly if you're someone who've experienced racism at your school, or if your kids have. Because I know there's some families of color that are on here, there's staff of color that are on here, that this really does trigger you deeply. And so I want to acknowledge that. And I think that's the beauty of coming to a session like this, is how can we use our skill set? All of you listening right now, this is not what we want in our schools. My daughter's going to be in school coming up. I want to make sure that I'm helping create a safer environment for schools across the country. And so I'm really excited that we're going to learn some of those strategies so that we can reduce this. And again, as I'm moving through this part, these are times where if you need to reread or take notes, or I know we're going to give you, I'll have the resources that are shared today, but it's so important that that we start taking it to heart. We're going to start off by just thinking about when you have a major racial incident happen in your building, it's so important that you begin by creating some type of plan to respond, whether it's proactively. So before you even have racial incidents happen in your building, just like when fire drills happen, you prepare for fires all the time. And if you kept having fires break out in your school, just like we realize racism, microaggressions, things on social media keep happening in our schools, those are like fires. And at some point you gotta think, well, we might as well at least get a fire extinguisher. And this plan, some of these things I'm gonna show you are gonna be like your plan, your fire extinguisher, your thing to do when racism happens in your school, or in your workplace, or in your office, so that you can be a leader in your building. You can show up and say, I got something we can do when this happens. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you this resource that I have here. But before that, I think it's important that you do this audit of yourself, of your building, pretty frequently. I'd say just like at the beginning of the school year, when you meet and you do in-services, it'd be ideal to do it, especially in this day and age. You couldn't go the past year. We haven't been a whole year without having major racial or political incidents occur. So I'd rather, especially in the time we're in moving forward, have a resource, something to do, some way to prepare, instead of being reactive, like, oh shoot, we don't know what to do now. And so being aware of your school's climate, where and who keeps experiencing microaggressions and racism, your social media, keep an eye for what things kids are saying on there. And so what I'm going to do, and this will be available to you, it's also currently available through Teaching Tolerance. I know they changed their name. And so I want to pull that up so that you all can see this resource. And so this resource is around how to support schools after a major racial incident. And so it's important that you have some of these things in place. Understanding your school climate, who's going to manage the incident responses when they happen, listing the names of people. so that in that moment, you're not scrambling like, hey, who do we talk to? Like if you had a fire, you wouldn't be like, hey, who's supposed to go ahead and grab the extinguisher first? Who's supposed to be where? Who's supposed to hold the door open for students to leave out? Who's supposed to come over the intercom? You have those people in place in advance around who will communicate the incident to students and families. Who's going to be ready to respond? So who is it? What's their position? What training have they had? Who's on your team of people in your community that you can connect with in advance? And then here it goes into the actual school or institution level. So if you're at a college, if you're at a school, elementary, middle, high school, if you're at a community organization, think about what is your policy currently around addressing race and bias? What are you all currently doing right now to address it? So this would be a great place to just think, what is your policy? What's your current campus code of conduct? And again, this resource is from an organization called Teaching Tolerance. They just changed their name and I keep forgetting their new name, but I'll make sure you have this document with all the resources on here. And so it's important that you begin by knowing what's the language that we're already using to address race and equity in our school, and doing that at the beginning of the year. I know a lot of schools have a handbook, and so that's the perfect timing when you're addressing the handbook, when to be at school, what your schedule is, what's how to be on time, what's appropriate behavior, not appropriate behavior. You take it another level and you say, hey, we're going to talk about race and racism, because in our country we've seen that happen. Maybe even in our own building we've had incidents happen, and we want to make sure everyone feels welcome. So as we talk about our handbook today, we're going to talk about addressing racism and make sure in this space we know when racist things like this and this or this are said or posted on social media, that's not allowed here. And here's how we respond when that happens. So that kids and their families know, okay, there's a plan at school for when racism happens. They're actually going to do something about it. Also knowing where are the hot spots, and hot spots aren't always in person. Learning for justice. Thank you, Brenda. I keep saying the wrong name. I appreciate you, Brenda. Thanks for helping me out. I appreciate you. And so this resource is found on there, and I'll make sure to have this in the follow-up information too. But do this as a team and sit and say, what is the current climate of our school? What things have we been hearing kids say? You all listed all the things that you have heard, where you've heard it. You saw that video where kids were talking about things that they heard. I have heard things in my own life from students, so we know it's happening. Let's put it out there. Let's talk about, all right, here's where we're hearing, here's when we're hearing it, here's how students are feeling around it, here's our hot spots. And it's so important to know, because if it's in the lunchroom, if it's social media, if it's at sporting events, I've seen it at sporting events where kids know those are spaces where they can say things and maybe adults might not be there to catch it or call them out. So being aware of some of those things. And then also it's important for us to build staff capacity. And some of you all are on the journey of that today, but ongoing professional development around having these conversations. And we're giving you a sample of it today. I'll give you some more strategies, but I hope to be able to connect with you all moving forward if interested in more professional development and hands-on scenarios like we're going to do coming up to prep yourself, to understand how to navigate these situations. And so this resource is so needed, especially as we keep having incidents occur. And so I'll make sure to share it with you. And it's something that we've walked through with our school counselors in Minneapolis to make sure that they are the ones ready to respond. And then we also give them lessons and ideas for small group spaces when racism occurs in schools. So that is, and that's in a nutshell. I know that's a whole training in itself, but I wanted to give you all that as something to begin with, to understand that you have things you can do, and it's going to be so empowering where you're like, I can actually do something. And students will recognize that. That's the best part. You saw the video where the students said, hey, people need to speak up. We need to educate. Guess what? This is one resource to get you started. I'm excited that I'm able to share that with you guys today. You got me getting pretty pumped now. I'm really excited because it helps us all grow. The next piece that I'm really excited for us to dive into is now understanding what it feels like, how students experience racism and discrimination in schools as a student. Because sometimes this microaggression and racism happens from student to student, but I think it's so important for us to know that us, staff, adults, we have to work on ourselves, work on the way we talk to students, work on the way that we may perpetuate racism and discrimination in schools. And so what we're going to do, think to yourself as an adult now when we watch this video, what it would feel like for this student that just transferred into a school, and just how would you respond if you were a colleague and this student came and told you what they were experiencing? How would you show up to a colleague and say, hey, and whether it's a colleague that's in the same work that you do or someone who maybe works in a different office, how would you say, hey, this student came to me and shared this? And so I'm going to go ahead and play the video and then get your brain thinking, how would I respond if I had this feedback, if I heard a student come to me and share this? And so I hope it's already ready to go. Sometimes it makes me reload and might show an ad here. Come on, computer. Okay, it might make us watch an advertisement. Hopefully it doesn't. Oh, making us watch an ad. I apologize. I hope it stops. I'll stop sharing my screen while the ad loads up. If you need to grab another coffee or whatnot, go grab yourself a coffee while this ad plays up, or just start reflecting on things we talked about. We're going through a lot of heavy stuff. So, all right, the ad is done. I'm going to pull it up now. All right, so let's take a listen to the student and their experience. And you think to yourself, how would you speak up? How would you support the student? How would you dialogue with your colleague after the student tells you this is what they experience? So now we're thinking to ourselves, skills around staff to staff, peer to peer for us as adults. When we hear stories from students, how do we intervene?
From Martha Brown, and I was getting like really good grades, nothing less than like a 95. And then when I came here, they originally put me like an extra help for math and English, and I would constantly, like at least once a week, would have to go and speak to the counselor because I'm like, I don't belong in these classes. You see my grades, you have my transcript. I don't need any of this. And it took me a while to like convince them to take me out of those classes, as well as try to get into harder classes, because all the classes they had me in, like the regular math, was stuff I'd already done. So it took me, I was finally able to transfer out of like the extra help for English or math, but they're like, let's just see like how you do in these classes. And they kept me in those classes. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm tired of having to talk to them. I didn't like really want to trouble my parents with it. And I know they have, like they can speak English, but like it would be hard for them to like try to talk with the counselor and stuff, and I don't want to like burden them or anything. So like I myself just stopped trying. But luckily Miss Sherney, she worked in the high school and she knew my older sister, and she like saw me in the library and she started talking to me, and I told her about what was going on, and she's like, you know what, I'll take care of it. And she took care of it. She went and talked to the counselors, and within like a week or two I was transferred into the classes that I needed to be in.
All right, so stop and pause for a second to think, just knowing that student and that student sharing, like, I'm a new student at school. I know where things are for me academically. I'm trying to get help. I don't want to burden my family. Why am I in this lower level class? Why? And if you had a colleague who wasn't hearing the student out, having them go into that lower level class, and the student shared, I don't want to burden my parents there. They speak English, but it would maybe be a hassle having to talk to them about it. So help think about how that would make a student feel, their initial reaction in the school, their first couple interactions with a staff. How would you respond to your own colleague? If you had a teammate, you're like, hey, how would you, thanks for letting me know, I'll increase the volume next time. How would you talk to a teammate? How would you navigate a situation like that? I'm sorry if the volume did not play enough or loud enough. I will I'll make sure, and this will all be recorded, I'll make sure that hopefully you can go back and check it out. So sorry about that. for those of you who couldn't hear it. What we're going to do is briefly get an understanding of microaggressions, because I think a lot of what we've been sharing and talking about has been what's called microaggressions. And if you understand microaggressions, there's nothing micro about it. It has profound impact on people. It hurts, it stings, and it comes in a variety of ways. And so I want to make sure that we have an understanding when we say microaggressions, that we're knowing that these are those everyday slights, those comments that are said that are usually unconscious when people say things that they think has no harm behind it, but it can definitely cause some hurt. And so understand that there's micro assaults. So those are where they are more conscious, hurtful things that people say. Micro insults are those very subtle, rude messaging that are insensitive. And sometimes I've heard students say those things before. And I know we're talking about, okay, they're words, that students are just saying these things. But I think it's important for us to know that kids, when they're developing at that early age, trying to figure out who they are and build a sense of worth and build a sense for their identity of how they look and who they are and how they show up in school, and if they're smart or if the people that look like them are smart or beautiful or kind. If you say things to cut down who they are while they're trying to grow and develop, those things stick. And it's not always just race. Sometimes it's body imaging. My goodness, there's kids who feel that they don't look good enough, whether it's they weigh too much, or they don't weigh enough, or they want to put on muscle. Those things stick with you. I know myself growing up, I would struggle with feeling like I was in shape enough, or that I was my attractive enough. We all have those insecurities, and when you're growing up and other kids are picking on you for some of those things, oh my goodness, that's damaging, let alone when it's around your race or your identity. And so I want to go ahead and share some of the themes that are seen with race-based and other types of microaggressions. And so some of the themes of alien in your own land. You might hear the microaggression of, oh, you speak really good English, to someone who might be of an ethnic background or have an accent. The other theme in microaggressions is colorblindness. So when folks say, hey, when I look at you, I don't see color. The other one I hear, you hear sometimes is, hey, my best friend is Black. I know what it's like. I have a Black friend. And so some other ones that I think is important for us to be mindful of is any other types of microaggression, especially towards gender or sexual orientation or different ability levels. People are hearing these things. The students shared in the videos, these are some of the things they were hearing. And so I want to show a brief, I'm going to show a super brief video around, but you know what? I'm not going to. I think we talked about microaggressions. I want to get to our next activity of navigating. What do you do in those moments? How do you speak up? So I want, these videos will be embedded in the PowerPoint you get so that you're able to watch and see how microaggressions show up, whether in schools or in our community, in community spaces, what it feels like, how it feels to have it happen to you. I know last time we watched the video, The Look, and that's just one example of how bias and microaggressions happen, even without even saying a word. And so I think it's so important for us to understand what it feels like when people experience microaggressions. I know for myself personally, I've experienced microaggressions in my personal life and in my school life. And the way that's looked, I'm 6'4", 6'5", African-American guy. And this is me, Derek, in my work setting zone. And you all know me as a school counselor, as a professional development leader. But as soon as this webinar is done and I'm traveling in public and if I, let's say even just the grocery store, if I'm in the self-checkout line, I notice, even last week, I feel the eyes on me by the people working there thinking like, oh, is he gonna, and it's not even said, it's just watching, they'll stand beside me and watch. And this happened just last week. And that starts to that messes with you when you're like, goodness, what's this mean? Do they think I would steal something? I promise you I wouldn't. Should I say something? It can be very stressful to keep experiencing microaggressions. And so I'm going to show a quick video that talks about what it's like to continue to experience microaggressions. Some of you may have seen it with the bees explaining what microaggressions feel like. So take a look at what people are saying when they experience microaggressions. Make sure the volume's up first too.
Still don't think that microaggressions are a problem?
Oh, you're so well spoken.
Just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love shared.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
Grammarly does more than catch error.
So for those of you checking out that video, I hope so bad it was louder this time because I know if it's hard to hear, that can make it challenging. So I hope you're able to hear it that time. Come on, computer. Gotta love technology, huh? I'm trying to get it to play from this slide. Thanks for your patience. Okay, there we go, from current slide. All right. So microaggressions, it gets exhausting. And I share this because I know I've had students share with me times they've experienced microaggressions from other students or staff. And then I have to be honest, there's been times where I've had to call myself out and students called me out around my own microaggressions. And that can be hard. I think that can be hard to have to speak up when you see someone being treated poorly or when you see a microaggression or racism. And so I think it's so important that we learn some skills to call out racism and microaggressions when we see it in the moment. I think it's so important that we are able to equip ourselves with the words, the language, the tools when we see something happening. When someone says like, "Oh wow, like your English is really good," or "you're pretty for a Black girl," or "Wow, why is your hair like that?" or "Aren't you really good at basketball? I thought all Black people were." How do we dive in? How do we have a conversation? Because we've been in those moments, maybe even at dinner tables with family members, and someone says something and you're just like, "Oh shoot," and you just sink and you're like, "Oh, what do we do now? It's gonna get so awkward." No one wants to ruin dinner. And I've been in situations in my own life, in family, in social settings where someone says something racist or biased or a microaggression, and you're like, what do we do? Do we just sit there? We all know the silence makes it even more uncomfortable. And so also too, we're like, well, we don't want to make them feel bad. How do we call this out? So here's some strategies. And I'm excited because I hope the next time and maybe even next week as things are coming up around George Floyd, as we try to seek justice for George Floyd in the murder trial coming up. Here's some things that you can use. And it's called the Raven approach. Some professors I know out in San Diego that they do this work around helping people dive into conversations, meaningful conversations around race and combating racism. So the R in Raven stands for that intervening, that initial, when someone says something that is racist or discriminatory or sexist, that intervening of saying, whether it's right, and I think it's being aware of yourself in that moment. Hey, I heard there's something you said there, and we need to just pause, and I think we need to just talk about what you just said, or maybe even pulling that person aside and saying, hey, can I talk to you in a second after we're done about just some of the things that came up? Or that if it's really major in the moment, be like, hey, something what you just said there, can you clarify? Can we just pause around that? I think for us learning and growing together, I think it's important for us to use those probing questions. And again, knowing yourself in a way, and we'll talk about calling in, but in a way to say, hey, I think I heard you say this. I think I heard you say this about our Latinx families. Can you help me learn more about what you mean? Values, coming back to, all right, these are our values at a school. As a school, we value students from all different backgrounds. And so it's so important that we stick to those values, and saying things like that doesn't align with our values. This next page, I want to give you some sentence stems, actual things. So have these words on the tip of your mouth when you hear those racist things or microaggressions. And I know it can be hard, especially for us here in Minnesota. We don't want to make it uncomfortable. We want to be able to hang out at the fire and just be cozy and not ruin. I'm in my zone. Don't ruin it. Shoot, now I got to speak up. But I think the beauty of it is, if you've ever been at those events or at a social setting or a dinner table or in a classroom where something's been said and you didn't say anything, I've felt that just carry with me, where even sometimes I get back in the space around other people, I'm like, it's still in my mind. Oh, that didn't get addressed. I'm still thinking about it. So these are strategies to help you break the ice, seek clarity, and by saying, hey, tell me more about what you mean when you say that. Or I love the alternate perspective. Like, you say that about people who live in North Minneapolis, but I'm going to give you another perspective, because I've been working and I've lived in North Minneapolis, and I don't see it like that at all. And then also finding common ground. I think it's so important that we say, you know what, we don't agree on what you just said, but we do agree that students in our school need to feel safe. So if words are said here that are hurtful or actions, we're on the same page with that. I think it's so important that we take some time and space to revisit conversations that are hard, because I think there's so much tension because people haven't always had the reps to have these conversations or to have the challenges of the stress in these times. And so they run. And so instead of running, dive into it, give yourself space as needed to say, all right, we're going to come back and have this conversation again. But the goal of this is for us to grow and connecting and understand each other in our truths. And I think it's important that you set boundaries, because I've worked with colleagues who even as of when the pandemic began, I had heard some colleagues who were calling the coronavirus the China flu. And that is damaging. I had students, Asian American students, that were sharing, man, I've been hearing kids at school say this. I've had teachers call it the China flu. And that feeling of knowing students were feeling hurt by hearing that, being discriminated against. I had to set a boundary that said, if I hear anyone say China flu or China virus, I'm stopping them right there, saying, hey, that's not appropriate to say. We don't say that here. That impacts students. There's students here that if you say that, it's going to hurt them. And so I'm sharing this with you so that you can grow. And I believe you don't want to hurt students here either. So I think those are some of the ways we can start calling people in to have these conversations. And so that's what we're going to talk about now, is doing this, especially if it's new for you to speak up. It's so important to know yourself, know your pattern when racism and discrimination happens in front of you, when bias happens, when sexism happens, when whatever level of discrimination happens, know yourself and how it triggers you. Because I think it's important, that can be the difference between wanting to call someone out and shame them and embarrass them, and calling them in and saying, hey, I see this as an opportunity for us to learn and grow together. I'm going to give you some sort of benefit of the doubt that you're here to grow and learn. And so obviously if there's a gross horrible thing that happens to students or to family members or colleagues, it's important that we call it out and say, hey, we need this to stop. Something needs to be said. But I think it's important that we encourage calling people in, and especially when working with students. When students are sharing their hurts around something or bias or racism, help them by calling them in and saying, hey, I want to talk about this. Affirm that, hey, this topic that you want to talk about is really important. And I think it's important, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, how to set the space for that. And so what we're going to do is I want to give us some time. We can always come back to that standing matter of fact, I think we have a moment to do that. We got about 15, 17 minutes, and I have some stuff that I'm really excited that I'm so glad that there's time left, and I'm so glad that there's stuff to share with you. And I want to get to the actual resources as well. And so we're going to watch this short video around calling in versus calling out. And I'm going to turn the volume up to make sure we're all good. Here we go.
How can we use language to challenge other people's behaviour when it's offensive, or stand up on behalf of those who need it?
Unfortunately, we're going to find ourselves in situations where someone's being prejudiced or harmful towards a group or person. And whether that's being racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ageist, ableist, or prejudiced in some other way, it's important that we can let that person know that their behaviour is not okay.
Yeah, what we're talking about is calling someone in or calling someone out based on their behaviour.
Let's discuss the difference between calling in and calling out.
Yeah, essentially they have the same purpose, which is to point out that what someone's doing is not okay. They just have different ways of achieving it.
Calling out is naming in the moment in front of whoever's present that the situation is not okay.
And calling someone in, on the other hand, involves addressing that person's behaviour more privately or personally. It might take place a little bit later on, and it usually involves taking the time to explain why that person's behaviour was offensive.
Okay, let's use an example. I'll pick something a bit random so it's not offensive to anyone. Let's say I'm being really awful about someone who's wearing a dinosaur t-shirt, which of course I'd never do because dinosaur t-shirts are awesome.
True.
Anyway, let's go with it. Hey, I was meaning to tell you, I bumped into Amir last weekend, and get this, it was so messed up. He was wearing a dinosaur t-shirt. As soon as I realised, I got out of there. It was disgusting. Like, how could he think that was okay? And you know what they say about people who wear dinosaur t-shirts.
Hey, come on. People can wear whatever they want. Hey, remember what you said earlier about Amir wearing that t-shirt? I just wanted to clarify what you meant because, to be honest, it's just a t-shirt and we all wear them differently.
So it's obvious from that example that calling out is a much more direct process, which means it can be sometimes met with a defensive reaction. Calling in, on the flip side, is a much more calm process and often takes more time, energy, and patience. But both methods are 100% valid.
Yeah, completely. And let's imagine that in that example, Danny wasn't just talking about a t-shirt. Imagine that those comments had been made about Amir's religious beliefs or cultural clothing or gender diversity or maybe a disability that he has. And while calling someone in is a great way to generate positive conversations, it's not always possible, right? I may not have felt comfortable approaching Danny on a personal level, or maybe they have a form of power over me that makes calling them in really, really difficult, like popularity or leadership or maybe being part of a majority group.
And realistically, if you're the person experiencing discrimination, it's not up to you to educate the people who are doing the discriminating.
So if you're being discriminated against or oppressed or targeted by someone who has power over you, we reckon you have every right to call that person in or out. But in those moments when you're deciding which approach to take, we think you should ask yourself a few questions. First up, what are their intentions? Are they trying to cause harm or offence, or have they just been careless with their words?
What's best for you? Having the conversation one-on-one or in a setting where there's other people around?
And thirdly, what do you want to get out of it? Do you just want to name that what that person did was offensive, or do you want to explain the impact of their behaviour and how they can improve in the future?
So at the end of the day, we're all going to be faced with prejudice at some point. And it's really important that in those moments, if it's safe for us, we feel empowered to call someone in or out in their behaviour.
Yeah, and we know it's not always easy, but if it means standing up for yourself or somebody else, we reckon it's worth it.
So that shared an example of, we'll come to that in a second. So that video shared an example of, come on, computer. There we go. Thanks for stopping. So that just gave some examples of knowing how to stand up and doing calling out versus calling in. I think it's important for us to be mindful of how to use those skills. Again, if you have a moment to come back and look at the presentation, I'd say sit here and asking yourself, okay, when these situations happen, these are now interpersonal. It might be someone you're friends with. It might be a neighbor. It might be your own parent. But it's important to start making those baby steps towards growing in this. The other key piece that's really important, that I think is equally important, is understand how do you handle race-based feedback. I know for a lot of people that can be one of the hardest things. And so to just imagine being in a position where you're like, oh, I have to handle feedback from someone of a different race, tell me about something I can grow and work on. A lot of times I know it can be met with defensiveness. They're met with, oh man, like, I'm not like that. I would never do that. I know a lot of educators who have came to me and said, a student told me, they called me racist today. Or they said, that I'm being racist to them. And I know sometimes staff will blow it off and say, oh, they're just saying that. Instead of evaluating, okay, let me listen to the student and see why they may feel this is going on. What are some things that they may have experienced previously that this is demonstrating for them again? And I know that is one key thing that you can offer students when they share that they've experienced racism or give you feedback. It takes a lot of guts, especially for people of color, to say, this is what's really happening to me. This is how I've felt it. The reason it takes guts is because there's always that worry about being vulnerable, and if anyone's going to hear you or validate that they heard you or believe that you said what happened really happened. I think it's so important, and we'll talk about being allies later, around making sure you're in the position to grow and listen and do your own work. And so we'll talk about impact versus intent. But what I want to do is give you a chance to watch a video and thinking about, if you're the people in this video, calling out and seeing what microaggression happened in the video. And then if you were the anchor that did the microaggression, how would you react? How could you show some humility and respond to making an error? And so we're going to watch this video, and it's for you to think, because I know many of us have been in situations where we've said something that might have been hurtful to people, to someone of a different race or someone of a different gender or sexual orientation. So it's so important that we start thinking about, all right, when that happens, and it will happen, how do I recover? How do I make amends for the situation? So we're going to watch the first 30 seconds of this, and you'll see and hear what happens, and then we'll pause and just break down, like, all right, how do you recover from this? So let's take a listen at this situation and talk about ways to recover.
And check out this cute video that the OKC Zoo just posted.
Okay, you have to see this. This is Finn. We're about to show. Oh my goodness, take a look at him. He's a resident of the Oklahoma City Zoo. And this week, the zoo's ape caretaker took over their Instagram, and we are all loving that they did. And as you can see, Finn was fascinated.
Definitely ready for his close-up there.
Kind of looks like you when you took a picture.
It kind of does, actually, yeah. Very.
All right. So take a moment to yourself and think about when you saw that video. Just letting it sit there for a second. The two anchors were there. They're talking about the zoo and the gorilla, and just thinking about what microaggression might have been said there. How would you react? What are some ways that you can have a conversation? This could happen interpersonally with you and a student, or you and a colleague. So take a second to think, goodness, if I'm in a situation like that, how would I respond? How can we move forward from a conversation that maybe had some a microaggression? How do you say, all right, let's work through this? And again, I want to go back to these strategies because and before we go to the strategies, I want to share just what you saw in the video. The microaggression that came up is the news anchor compared her Black colleague to saying that he looks like similar to the gorilla. And I know some folks might be like, oh, they're just joking. It's in jest, it's in light. But I know if you get a chance to see the rest of the video, that she does share and talk about how that would come off and understanding in hindsight how that is a microaggression. And I like that I see that there's examples of how do you make that situation better. Own your mistake, call it out. And I know for him, he could have in the moment been like, hey, and he's on air, but also the discomfort for him, like, what do I say? And that's experienced a lot by people when that microaggression happens. And so understand for her, what other strategies she could have done. I saw someone share that she owning it. And I think that's going to be a huge piece of just owning it, making sure the other person feels heard. Offer a genuine apology. I think it's so important to do that. And then there's some don'ts. And I think one of the big parts, and if you get a chance, we won't show it today, seeing how she recovers. She does some things well in her recovery, but there's some things that she could grow in. And just like all of us, we have some areas that we can all grow in. And so I think it's important when you find yourself in a situation where you've done something hurtful, to be aware of yourself, to say, you know what, I'm going to come back tomorrow and do better. I'm going to do my own work. I'm going to really try my hardest to not do that again. I'm going to listen. That goes such a long way. I know you see the pictures here, and I want to be the first to say it hurts my heart in our current climate where people get shamed, people get Karen'd now for making errors. And I know there's times where there's malice behind those errors when they do those things, whether it's saying things racist publicly or being scared of people from different backgrounds in public places. But I want to encourage us to not add into discrimination or treating people poorly in these situations. I think it's important that I'm one of those people, I offer grace. I see it from the lens of maybe that person has not really had a conversation with someone who looks like me to realize that what they've done or what they're saying could be hurtful. And so I think it's really important that we're aware of offering ourselves an opportunity to grow and learn, and how we can, in those moments when we're correcting other people, correct them in a way that we're calling people in. Because it makes for a healthier school environment and environment for students. And students are watching. We're always modeling how to do this work, whether it's in front of students or in front of our colleagues. And so I wanted to, I know we got about 5 minutes till the question and answer session. And so I was going to go through some lessons, but I want to make sure that creating lessons, leading lessons, and I'll have lessons that are recorded for you all to check out. It's important when you're leading lessons and conversation around race with students. I think it's important that you create the space, the brave space. And these are going to be spaces where students feel they can come in and be heard. It's really important, especially for your marginalized students, because oftentimes there's not a space in school where you can talk about the racism you've experienced at school. And so helping students know, just feeling human, feeling like you belong, you matter, what happened, what was said, that really is important. That really did hurt you. And this is a place you can come to heal and find some hope. I know that hope is huge, and I hope that you're able to use some of the lessons that are shared to help students talk about race. Here's some other considerations for leading the lessons that we'll share with you around race. Understand yourself, your identity, your background, your comfort level talking about race. Do you at your own home, with your own friends, when you're around that bonfire, what are conversations like about race? When you're at the lake, I think being aware of ourselves, we know people in our circles who you're like, man, I know some of the things that they say are, ugh. So be mindful that even in your workplace, when you're leading lessons, how do you navigate students who will say things that are hurtful and impactful? it's important that you're able to teach them how to speak up, how to call out racism, and that's using those proactive anti-racism skills. So you'll have the different lessons that I'll share out with you all. One of them I'm going to just share now, and it's recording. I think I might have shared it briefly prior, but it's a lesson we did here in elementary with that's available for all our elementary schools in Minneapolis, and it's using the book The Color of Us to introduce the topic of race to kids. And so the lessons recorded, and I'll share it with you, was helping kids understand what are shades of color, and that people come in different shades, and that they're beautiful just the way they are. And so we lead into the lesson talking about what are colors, and then what are shades. We pull out the markers and say, these are colors, and these are shades of a color. And then we talk about how, guess what? People come in different shades of the color brown, beige. And so helping kids then dive into the book. What do you think it's going to be about? What do the different colors of shades mean? What do you see? So then you're introducing kids to the topic of race in a beautiful way, in a curious way. And so you go through the book, and then also what we like to do is give students just some space to make the connection to the book, from the book to their school. So saying, hey, in Minneapolis, in our school, look around. There's people of different shades here. What shades do you see? That's awesome. Look around your house if you're virtual. What other shades do you see? You know? And then we also like to be mindful. We give kids the history of schooling and how they are able to be in schools with kids of different backgrounds. And then we love to empower students to let them know, it's you I like. I love Mr. Rogers. So in this lesson, as it concludes, it tells kids, we care about you. We love that you're from a different background. We love the diversity and ethnicity that students and families bring in. And that's so important for kids to see you say that to them specifically. The last thing I want to share with you all, I have to share this with you all, because I'm aware that we're here in Minnesota. And in the next couple months, or even as you're leading lessons, it's going to be important for you to be aware of how you can show up and speak up. You can do this work. I know a majority of the people on here are white educators. And I know there's times where you might work in an area that's predominantly white. And you're like, oh man, we don't need to talk about this here. No one's really gonna talk about it, or it's gonna get really weird. And I really want to speak to you right now and encourage you to do it for yourself, to grow yourself, but also for your students who may be all white, because it's gonna help them when they grow up in a world that's way more diverse than the space they might currently be in. Imagine when you go to college, for a lot of students, it's going to be their first time maybe even living with someone of a different race or ethnicity. And the other thing is, see the beauty in yourself as an educator. The people I have in the picture, they're both white educators. I only had one educator of color my entire life. And so the best thing for me has been white people who have poured into my life, who have looked at me, saw my humanity, and said, hey, I want to get to know you. I see your skills. These are the two people who got me into education and school counseling. Ms. Brumbaugh I had as a teacher in high school, and I was in her child development class, and she pushed me. She said, you should be a teacher. You need to be in schools. The guy in the picture, Jim Bierma, he's my supervisor, and he pushed me into being a school counselor. He was at the U of M when I was a student there. And if you're a white educator right now thinking like, can I do this work? Can I transform lives? Yeah, we're waiting on you. We want you to do the work, continue to, and know that you can do it cross-culturally. And I say it to educators of color out there. In my experience working at Champlain Park, I worked with a lot of white students, and it felt empowering coming in. I used to think, well, they'd listen to me. Will they want a counselor like me? And the kids, I thought they were cool. I enjoyed working with them. You guys are probably like, they probably thought you were nuts. I probably was a little bit, but I loved working with them. And I built an authentic relationship with my white students. And so I would say ask a lot of people of color, they have white educators in their life that made a difference. And I know you can do that. And so it does take that collaboration and humility to say, I want to grow and learn. I want to be open to people giving me feedback. And I hope that that you're able to do that because I've worked with some awesome peers that are white that are helping me grow, pouring into me. And so I also want to encourage you to expand your circle. we have a lot of awesome places in the Twin Cities to get to know people of different backgrounds in our community. I know an area that when I came to Minneapolis, in this role that I'm in, I didn't know a lot about the American Indian population here in Minneapolis. And I knew I needed to grow in learning more about our Asian American students in the Hmong population. And so I started to go to places on my own and say, hey, I'm gonna go and check these places out and learn about the culture and the history. And then my friends that I have that are from these ethnic and racial backgrounds, I am intentional about connecting with them, or even the students. I'll learn some things and then I'll go and dialogue with students. I know during Ramadan, I started dialoguing with our Muslim students about how it was going fasting and when are they excited for the celebration when the fast breaks. And they'd even say, oh, I'm tired, we're fasting still. But helping them know, like, okay, I know about that. I'm trying to learn and understand. And I would see them even be able to come to my office and say, oh yeah, I'm tired. Can I just take a minute? You know, I'm in Ramadan. I'm like, yes, for sure. So those are the kind of ways we get to know about people and their different cultures. And so I've shared quite a bit. I've enjoyed connecting with you all, and I want to stay connected. This is a presentation you enjoyed, or you're like, hey, I think someone in our district would want to see this, or there's staff that would want to see something like this, or I want to talk more about how to navigate racism in our school, or talk about race of kids. I have a menu of professional development that I do like this in a couple hour segments. And then also I am partnered with this organization called Hatching Results. They're the #1 professional development organization in school counseling. And I say #1 because it's research-based, and they've been doing professional development in corporate offices, schools, communities. And so I'm excited that they allow me to lead these workshops for their organization. So I would love to stay connected and hopefully come and present this for your building or staff as well. And so I know we're at the end of the presentation. I've been talking at you for a while. I'm excited to hear some questions and let's dialogue. I'll pause and see what we got for questions.
Thank you so much, Derek. And we do have some great questions here in the Q&A box. So I'm just gonna jump right in. How do you respond to white? Yeah, how do you respond to white male students who push back during race conversations? How do you address them and teach them about their privilege and place in this when they're coming from homes that are not open to equity conversations?
Yeah. I think as you're sharing that, I've had that happen. I had it happen actually I was a counselor during the 2016 election. And I talk about, there's a book that I'm featured in, and I talk about this where I had a student who he didn't have any friends of color in school, and he really would even share that at home that they when they talked about, I'm trying to say it without saying, they didn't have kind words to say about race, about people of different backgrounds. And so he would even, and so I happened to be a school counselor and during the election time. And so I think what really helped was when we would talk, I would ask him questions around feelings. And so this is just my way of sharing, but I would ask him, I'd say, what do you think it feels like when kids maybe, when people have felt that discriminated against? I would give examples. I'd show stories. And then once we got to know each other better, I would start sharing examples of things that I had seen at school. And so I think allowing room for, and it takes a while, allowing room for relationship building, empathy. The students started to build relationships through student organizations where he was connected with other kids from different backgrounds. And so from there, being able to hear the natural conversations of kids when the election had came up, it really softened his heart because he was an understand like, well, why are people saying that we can't say some of these things, or why? And so I think it's so important that we give them these experiences that they've never had, because once they get an opportunity to be with a peer and have a conversation and get to know them, they see their humanity. And then they say, oh yeah, you like soccer? Me too. You play video games? Guess what? Let's play. If you help them see that, even look at us here. if there's someone like, hey, I got it was 200 free tickets to the state fair. You guys all got to get a ticket and go the same day. I wouldn't care. I'd be like, I want to go. People on here who like the state fair. That's our affinity. That's our humanity, you know? And so I think that's one of the things that I try to do is help kids find their similarities, their humanity in each other. And it does take time though.
Thank you. Another question, how do you respond when co-teachers think that teaching kindness is enough?
I think it's important that we go beyond teaching kindness. And that's, I know I worked with Dr. Bettina Love this summer. They say it's just giving people a hug, anti-racism with a hug. And I think we have to be honest about giving students the tools to call out racism. It's important that we teach them the pro-social skills. That's definitely, and we do that, of be kind to everyone, the golden rule. But we have to be aware of the racism that's in our schools. We saw the video where the students talked about what they're hearing and what they've experienced at school. And just being nice isn't gonna make that go away. And so you have to give students and teach them what it feels like. Talk to them. What do you think it feels like when someone says that? What do you think it feels? How do you think it feels if someone said that about you and your background? And then you teach them. So when we hear this, here's what we say. Here's how we stop it. That's why we can't just do the be nice and be kind. You have to do the no, here's how you call it out. And especially for us as adults, if we haven't been in that pattern of calling it out, it can be harder to tell kids to do it when we know we've been in a position where we're like, I don't even know what to say now myself. So we need to learn those strategies so that we're modeling it for students. I remember coaching basketball early on, there'd be kids who would say, oh, that's so gay. And I would not speak up. And it made me so hurt when having a gay student speak up to me and say, hey, having a student have to speak up. And then I had to start learning, like, no, I got to speak up. And I shared that with my humility to say, we can't just say, hey, be nice to everyone and be kind. We have to say, no, that's not right to say. And I put myself out there because I want to make sure that I show that it's a process that I had to make sure to do too. So I hope we can do that to model it to students, because it'll make our hallways, it'll make our bathrooms, it'll make our classrooms a safer space.
Yeah, thanks. Another one here. Looks like we have about 3 left, Derek, at least so far. So as a white person, how can I help to lead these racial conversations without coming off as a white savior or a know-it-all?
Yeah, that's I think that's one of the key things, is doing it from that perspective of that we talked about it last time, humility, that we're all growing. And I think it's so important to own your own story, your identity, and I think that's what helps is liberating ourselves to say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm at right now. And I've started this journey, maybe you started when George Floyd was murdered, and you're like, but share that. And maybe even owning your own story to say, here's what it was like for me growing up. And so when and saying, hey, these are some of the messaging I was told, and now I'm starting to learn some things. I want to share a few what I'm learning. Or I know a lot of people love book clubs. There's nothing wrong with book clubs. I think it's important to move from book club to practical strategies and skills. So that could be sharing dialogue with people, but then always framing it from, hey, I'm here learning and growing, and even have the humility to say, here's a book I read. Here's where I'm getting this from. Because that way, and then there will be people who push back regardless too. But I think it's important to expect that and to work past it and to say, hey, I really hope that in time this person will grow and understand how to have these kind of conversations. So that would be my feedback.
Great. I'm in early education working with preschoolers, and the main teaching at this age tends to be around celebrating diversity and not being colorblind. What age do you consider it important or appropriate to explicitly call out or point out the term and the idea of racism? Thoughts on how to do that with preschoolers?
Yeah. Now you're speaking my language. My daughter, I shared a few. She's about two, and we talked last time about how kids begin to understand race, and so know that by age 3, kids are able to pick up on biases. I even watched it with my daughter, even just with saying no, like what things you like, biases around like how certain kids are that she'll want to play with and not play with, or I think it's important. So if they're understanding how to have bias, and at age 3, it begins to be where they're able to understand racial bias, or seeing people from different skin color, and maybe have an initial fear of like, oh, I don't know that person. Or if you ever get a chance to see the doll test, kids feeling more comfortable with the white doll. So I think it's important to start even at as young as age 3 to start having those dialogues to give students that understand of like, oh, here's both dolls are just as beautiful. Or even when they, if kids say things that like, oh, mommy, or because usually it's a lot of younger kids, that person's black. Be like, yeah, that is a black person, or their hair's beautiful like it is, or correcting when they say something that's not nice, or oh, those people are not nice. I heard those people, and then say, no, what do you mean by that? That's not true. We don't talk about people like that. Remember, we care about people from all different backgrounds. Black people are nice too. People who are Asian American are nice too. So we have to teach those skills, because it's then unlearning some of those patterns and behaviors. So I think it's so important that we give them those patterns over and over, whether it's reading a book or whether you're walking around the community. If there's natural times to talk about race and give kids the pro-social skills around it, I say start as early as possible. And there's, I think last session we shared the resources of how to do that, but we can make sure to get that out to you again.
Okay, Derek, looks like we have 1 minute, but we have 2 great questions. So I'm going to try to get through them both here. The first one is, our staff has recently had a lot of conversations around racism and equity. We have a few staff members who get really hung up on the N word, why it's okay for certain students to say it to each other and it's not okay for staff and other students. I feel like we've tried a lot of different strategies and it's not sticking. How do you address this?
Yeah, that's one of the questions when we had racism happen at Champlin Park. I had a student ask me that. She was like, Mr. Francis, just be honest. Like, I hear black kids say the N-word at school all the time, and my white friend just said it and she's getting suspended. And that's one of those words where understanding that it's so complex. But the way that I feel, especially, and I as a black educator, I think about the school setting. And so I know some people are in the school thought that, hey, students of color, black kids, they can say it whenever, however, wherever they want. The other piece to that is there are people who are like, no one should ever say it at any time in school. And so, or anyone should say it at all. The lens I see it from, and especially as an educator, is I want to help kids develop an understanding of the school and social environment, how it can be inclusive for everyone. And so I know part of that means the N-word in a school space can be very, very uncomfortable for people of all backgrounds, Black, white, Latinx, Asian. And so I understand that. And so when I talk to students, I share with them, understand where you're at, the context of the space you're in. Certain things that in the space that you're in it's gonna be hurtful. It's gonna disrupt the environment. And so being aware if you're gonna, because the other thing is there's a lot of educators who are like, they're like, well, we can't tell kids not to say that word. I think it's important that we educate kids on the word, the history of it, and understand why it impacts people the way it does. And then also I share with students too, what are you preparing for as far as your career? When you get into a place of employment, and this is the conversation I have with Black students, I say, if the word isn't a term of endearment, I've had teammates and people I work with, and even myself in spaces with people I'm connected with where that word comes out. And so I'm mindful that at the same time, that word is not a term of endearment for everyone. And so if you're in a space where it's, and especially as you're thinking moving forward in a professional setting, that's going to be a word that becomes more divisive. So being aware of your setting, I share that with students. I'll never want to stifle how you feel around a word or if it's a word you choose to use, but if you're in a school setting, it's disrupting the space. And there's people who don't have a full understanding of the word, then I think, and especially if there's not that ground level understanding, I think it's a word that schools need to be mindful is disruptive. If it's not, if you don't have the right framing and understanding around how to have conversations of the word. So I know I said a lot around that, and it gets a little different when I speak to students in a building and students of color in a setting, but I really do think it's important that we teach the history of the word too, so that students know, oh, why, because especially younger kids, they just hear it in a song or on TV, but don't have the rich background to the word. And so that's kind of like my short version of it. But I really do think that you got to examine your school environment. If it's causing disruptions in your school environment, I think it's something that you address and say, hey, this isn't a space that we want that to be said or say there, because it's dividing our building. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Derek. And more questions just keep popping up here. So we will pass all of your questions on to Derek, and especially the resource related ones. We will try to include those resources when we email back out the link to the recording and such. But one final question, Derek. I know some folks are having to drop off, but we'll hang here for a few more minutes.
Okay.
So an attendee is wondering, some people in our school district feel we should grade students of color differently than white because they feel they have barriers, and we need to understand that, and grading them the same doesn't help those students. So language and home life barriers. Have you heard this topic in other districts?
I have not, and I honestly would push back against it, because I know that one of the key things to do is students from underrepresented populations, students of color, they can learn. I think it's just changing your practice, understanding how they learn best. And I think that's been shown, especially in distance learning now, that the gaps between students of color and white students' achievement have been very apparent during this time. But I think where people have seen success is transforming the way they teach, ways to connect with students in their home life and their environment, and teach things that are speaking to their culture and their identity. I think that's one of the key things, is looking at your content. How are you talking about issues and topics that relate to the students? You'll see a whole different level of engagement when you do that. And I really hope, I'm going to share the social identity lesson, because we've done that lesson in Minneapolis middle and high school. And kids were like, hey, we want more of that. And these are students of color talking about, yes, I want to engage in this. And so I really feel that that students of color are just as bright, just as smart. And if you can understand and build that relationship and understand where they're coming from, that's going to be huge. I really believe that we can have the same support and understanding that students of color can achieve. I'm positive of it.
I'd like to step in, Jenny. Thank you so much for all your facilitation. Jenny will be documenting all the comments in the chat and the Q&A, and we'll do our best to respond. Derek, we are so privileged. I know that you just have such a promising career in professional development. I'm wondering, would you put the slide back on, if possible, the contact slide that you had about your speaking engagements? Because a lot of people have asked about how to bring you into their building or their school district. There we go.
Yeah, shoot me an email or message on LinkedIn or on Twitter, any of the social medias, or my email. I'd love to, and I have a menu of different topics that I could come in and cover like this. So if you have interest, I'd love to come by and lead some activities for you all. Thank you for telling me to put it back up.
Yeah, we definitely want to keep the conversation going in Dakota County. I know there are a lot of people outside of the county, but in Dakota County, we bring all the secondary school people, not all, but lots of student support personnel from all 50 secondary schools in our county. We'll continue the conversation on April 2nd about what we're going to do with all your work, and can we bring you back before the school year ends? How are we going to utilize your lessons? So I want to thank Liz Overding in the department, in the health department. She has helped me so much. We'll do our best to collect all the links and resources, including the resources that some of you have added in the Q&A box. I'm seeing some of that as well. Derek, I want to give you the last to close us up. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to close out, I really want to just share that I'm hopeful that you took something from today and that it touched your heart to a point where you said, hey, I want to do something different. I want to hear my students. Maybe it was the video with students sharing the experiences that they've had, or maybe it's just something on your heart around, all right, I want to speak up. I want to listen. But I really do feel that we're in a position to help heal our country. It's super exciting to know that our country is divided, but as educators, we're in the best seat from early age all the way till students graduate to help them see the beauty and connect with people from different backgrounds. It's been the best part of my career and my life, and I hope that these resources help you do that in your career. So thanks again for coming, and thanks for your time.
All right, and thank you to the Minnesota Department of Health for helping us bring Derek. It's just been an honor. We so appreciate your wisdom. Take care, everyone. Be well.
Take care. Awesome. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. You are going to get so much communication. There's so many people wanting to bring you a course, because now we want to really personalize it to the building specific issues, the cultures. But I'm just overwhelmed by the wisdom, and I can't wait to listen to it again. Derek, I'll make sure that you get all the information, obviously the links to the recordings, as well as we'll pull together the evaluation comments, as well as the list of the Q&A and chat box from both sessions. I also maybe not here, we shouldn't talk about it, but make sure we get your invoice so that you get paid. And you know, there was a contract manager, you can send it to her or Marguerite or myself.
Perfect.
Any thoughts or feedback for us?
I am thankful for the opportunity. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. To be honest, I speak from my heart, and it just feels just good being honest. I feel like I'm talking to friends, and that's how I try to set it up with just, I want to be comfortable, and I hope folks come and feel that they can engage in an honest dialogue and see our commonalities. I think that's the beauty of it. Now, if I see anyone to stay fair, I'll be like, oh yeah, hey, here's some cheese curds, let's share, you know? So, yeah.
And you know,